So December the 14th, 1967, Prabhupada is arriving in San Francisco. As soon as Srila Prabhupada came into view, many devotees began to cry or shed tears. He looked much healthier, tanned from the sun. He waved and smiled. That smile made them still more eager. They could hardly contain themselves, while Prabhupada patiently waited for a customs official to inspect his bags. When Prabhupada had left America, his disciples had been uncertain whether they would ever see him again. He had suffered a paralyzing stroke in New York and had gone back to India to recuperate. If he were going to die, he said, the best place in the world was Vrindavan. But soon, in his letters from India, came news of his returning strength. Krishna had saved him. Now he was back. They needed him. If they were to represent him and spread Krishna consciousness, then they needed more association with Krishna's pure devotee. Jayananda drove him from the airport in an old limousine decorated with flowers. Prabhupada would be staying in an apartment in the brahmachari's house on the Willard Street, about 2 blocks from the storefront on Frederick Street. As he approached the door of his apartment, he saw the picture of Lord Vishnu taped to the inside of the glass, facing him, although the devotees had debated about the picture because Lord Vishnu had not been colored blue. Prabhupada joined his palms together in the pranam gesture and slightly bowing his head past Lord Vishnu and entered the house. The devotees gathered excitedly in Prabhupada's room. One of them had read about a Vaishnava ceremony of washing the feet of the spiritual master, so they prepared a pitcher of water in a bowl. Prabhupada allowed it, and in a few seconds it was done. Then he sat facing a crowded room of intimate devotees. Taking his kartals and playing them softly and sweetly, he led a Hare Krishna kirtan. It was no ordinary thing how Prabhupada sang and how they listened and chanted in response with fascinated, ecstatic attention, but it was brief. Afterwards, he began to speak of Krishna. He said that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead and everyone's best friend. Even a good friendship in this world is a small indication of Krishna's friendship, because everything is coming from Krishna. If you feel good on a nice spring day, that is an indication of Krishna. The smell of an aromatic flower, that is Krishna. Whatever is good in this world is Krishna. And all that is bad comes from forgetfulness of Krishna. Krishna spoke with a kind, gentle, Prabhupada spoke with a kind, gentle, and humble attitude. So here it's interesting, Prabhupada is, Satsang Maharaj is writing, even a good friendship, he's saying, Prabhupada said, that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead and everyone's best friend. Even a good friendship in this world is a small indication of Krishna's friendship. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur elaborates on this in the latter part of Jaivadharma also. This material world is a perverted reflection of the spiritual world. So what is going on in this material world can give one a little idea of what is going on in the spiritual world. So here we have relationships. So by examining these relationships in the material world, it can give you a little idea of the availability or possibility of a type of relationship with Krishna. So Prabhupada is saying, even a good friendship in this world is a small indication of Krishna's friendship. So if you have some nice relationship in this world, or you're able to observe it in someone else, like you may see a young child playing on the lap of the mother. So this can act as an impetus, udipan. This can act as a remembrance of Krishna's pastimes with Mother Yasoda. Of course, the relationships in this material world are temporary, and they don't last long, and they're full of anxiety. The mother's in complete anxiety about the health of her daughter or son, and that anxiety is not blissful. But in the spiritual world, Mother Yasoda is in complete anxiety about Krishna. The word anxiety is chinta. C-I-N-T-A, Chinta, spiritual anxiety. But that spiritual anxiety is saturated, permeated with ananda, bliss. Whereas in the material world, the anxiety that a parent has for their child, is there really any bliss? Any ecstasy, any ananda? There's no elements of Hridini Shakti. It's miserable. So even a good friendship in this world is a small indication of Krishna's friendship. Another point to understand about this is there's three types of devotees: Kanishta, Madhyama, and Uttama. Right? Now an Uttama sees everything in relation to Krishna. Even if something is like very remotely connected to Krishna, for an Uttama, that provokes remembrance of Krishna. Like when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was in Jagannath Puri, he would see the sea. Like we can also see the sea. We can see the Indian Ocean, or we can see the Atlantic Ocean. Our choice. So when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu would see the Bay of Bengal, that would immediately remind him of Jamuna Devi. Then when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu saw the sand dune, Chatakapavita. Chatakapavita is a big sand dune that you can go to right now, and you can see it in Jagannath Puri. So what would that remind him of? What would that remind Chaitanya Mahaprabhu of? Govardhan Hill. Yes. Actually, at Chatakapavita in Jagannath Puri, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur established a mutt. He has two mutts in Jagannath Puri. One right opposite Haridas Thakur's place, where Bhaktivinoda Thakur had his house, which now belongs to ISKCON. And also Chatakapavita. There's a Gaudiya mat, and there is a room that Srila Bhaktisiddhanta used to stay in. So he chose to stay there, because it would remind him of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's pastimes. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu would see this sand dune, and immediately he'd think of Govardhan. He'd see a few trees, like we have in our garden a few trees, and he'd think of the different forests of vanas in Vrindavan. So these slightest thing would act as a remembrance. You would see a blue cloud in the sky and immediately think of Krishna, because Krishna is bluish in color. So even you see a good friendship in this material world, it reminds you of Krishna's friendship with the cowherd boys. You see parental affection in the material world, it reminds you of Krishna's eternal relationship with Mother Yasoda. But this can only happen if you're an advanced devotee. See? Unfortunately, if you're not so advanced, then even if you're standing in front of the deity of Krishna, you're not thinking of Krishna. Even if you're, in Jagannath Puri or Mayapur, you're not thinking of the Lord. So for an advanced devotee, even if there's like a slight remembrance, like a 1 or 2% possibility of something reminding you of Krishna, that's enough. And the advanced devotee will think. And there's a nice example, I've given this before. The great Havadut, Vamsidas Babaji Maharaj, who was a contemporary of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, who Srila Bhaktisiddhanta confirmed as being a Nityasiddha, one day saw a train. A train? That's like Ugra Karma. We see trains all the time. We hear them all the time across the road. So Vamsidas Babaji saw the train, and then he saw the wheels going around on the train. He thought, wheels, yes, going around, rotating. Rasa dance. And started to think of Krishna. That's Mahabhagavad. Now we see this train, 20 times a day. Doesn't remind us of Krishna at all. So Prabhupada brought back some gifts. For the ladies, he had saris. He held up thin cotton cloths one at a time, called the name of each initiated girl disciple, and handed her a sari. One sari was white with red and black design. Others are white with single color borders. In a small saffron cloth, Prabhupada had 3 silken garlands. He unwrapped them, saying, these can be tied around the necks of Jagannath, Subhadra, and Balaram. Previous to this, the devotees had received no dresses or decoration. So can you imagine how you would feel, ladies, if Srila Prabhupada gave you a sari? It's inconceivable. Just inconceivable. So another very interesting point is that, Prabhupada acted differently. We see through his life he acted differently. There was a time when he was a student, and he apparently exhibited some interest in Gandhi's ahimsa non-movement. In other words, he was involved in politics. There was a time when Prabhupada was, a grihastha, when actually he was concerned with, making money, but doing it in an honest way to maintain his family, and if he could make extra money, to preach. Then there was a time when Prabhupada retired, Vanaprastha, 1954. So he went through a different phase. When he was reclusive, he was writing. So Prabhupada has gone through different stages. Sometimes persons say, well, we should follow in Prabhupada's mood or footsteps, but he had many moods. You can just see in his life. If we choose to follow in Prabhupada's mood when he was a grihastha for some 30 years, he wasn't actually preaching much. Tried little 1944 to start back to Godhead. So Prabhupada went through exhibited different types of moods. And even as we know him from 1965 to 1977, he also had different moods. So in the early days, Prabhupada was very personal. He knew the name of every one of his disciples. He actually knew the name of every disciple. And it wasn't difficult for disciples to speak with him directly. Good to go into his room. We're going to read later, we may not read, but in 1968, Prabhupada's first lady disciple, Radharani, became ill. Now Prabhupada was very concerned. He was phoning, how is this Radharani? Was suggesting a diet she takes. He was very concerned about her, So in the early days, 66, 67, 68, 69, Prabhupada had a very personal relationship with his disciples. But then, of course, there was only a few disciples. Right now, we're talking about a situation, the end of 1967, when there was only 5 temples. That's all. And basically about 50 devotees. And Prabhupada acted as the temple president of each temple. If there was a problem, like who would pay for Radharani's hospital bill, they would phone Prabhupada. Who would pay for Upananda's hernia operation? They phoned Prabhupada. That's how it was in those days. So Prabhupada actually was the temple president. It wasn't until the society became larger in the early 70s, 70, when the Prabhupada moved more into the background. And then again, a different characteristic or a different mood of Prabhupada became manifest, when he became more aloof, more in the background. And when Prabhupada came to South Africa in 1975, there was only 6 or 7 devotees here, but Prabhupada didn't speak to us personally. He didn't speak to us personally and inquired, how are we, where we came from, etc. Whereas 10 years ago, he was speaking personally. So Prabhupada's attitude or mood changed. And this, of course, is because he became the founder, Acharya, of a very large international society, and he had to sort of go more into the background. But still, it's very sweet to hear about these early pastimes. At least I find these early pastimes much more enlivening because there's more personal dealing and more personal contact. Sometimes it's said, we should follow in the footsteps of Srila Prabhupada, but you can just imagine if the Guru comes and gives saris to his lady disciples. He's going to be in trouble. Right now, he's going to be in a lot of trouble. Especially with all this topics of, becoming a little more stricter, and he's going to be in severe trouble, But here Prabhupada is giving cotton saris, and he's quoting the name of each one of his disciples. He knows the name of each one of his disciples. After 1969, 70 became so many disciples, it wasn't possible. In 1969, when Prabhupada was in Germany, the Society printed the first Vyasa Puja book. In that Vyasa Puja book, when Prabhupada was in 1969, he was in June, July, he was in Germany with Shivananda. There were 15 temples that gave offerings. So each temple had approximately 5 or 6 to 10 devotees. So you're looking at about 150 devotees, 150 initiated disciples in 1969. So Prabhupada also gave these silk garlands. So that means we could also put silk garlands on Sri Sri Mayapur Chandra. Mukunda and Shyamasundar came forward to show Prabhupada the first American-made cartels. Months ago, Prabhupada had suggested that they might make cartels in America. And the men had analyzed the metals in the Indian cartels, gathered the ingredients from scrapyards, taken them to a foundry and had them molded into a finished product. Prabhupada took the first pair of American cartels in his hand. He hit them together a few times and he said, "Not so great." Then he took up his own beautifully polished brass cartels from India, striking them together for a long time. He let them ring and he said, "This is great." Then looking around the room, Prabhupada engaged in friendly little exchanges with his disciples. Seeing Lilavati, sitting in a corner with a baby daughter, Prabhupada said, "Your daughter looks like Subhadra." Lilavati sighed, gratefully. Govinda Dasi, Prabhupada said, "I'm always thinking of your paintings." So not only did Prabhupada, not only did he bring gifts, not only is he dealing with them, on a first personal name basis, but he's saying the right thing, which is what they want to hear. Lilavati has this young daughter. So, now what is sweeter to her ears than Prabhupada's glorification of a daughter? So he says, "Your daughter is like Subhadra." It's just what she wanted to hear. And then Govinda Dasi, she's painting. And she's not a very good painter, but she's trying. So Prabhupada is saying, "I'm always thinking of your paintings." So this is called being personal. Saying the right thing at the right time. And this is because Krishna is very personal. When Krishna is given a flower garden like this, then he knows who made it. He knows exactly who made it by the way it's made. Unfortunately, we don't. But Krishna does. Krishna is so, when Krishna is given a preparation, malpura, whatever it is, samosa, he knows who made it. He knows. Of course, he's a big Yasarat. He's fully cognizant. So, this is an example of being personal. So, we want a personal relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So, Prabhupada, being Krishna's representative, is being very personal. He's being very personal. And he's addressing the devotees exactly in a way that they want to be addressed. Prabhupada asked whether all the devotees were chanting the prescribed number of rounds. Almost everyone replied, "Yes, Swamiji." But one new devotee, however, an English girl, whose face turned bright red, began to stammer in a faltering voice. And she said, I chant. And then suddenly blurting out, like a little girl about to cry, she said, "Sometimes I chant more than 16 rounds a day." Her voice cracked. She seemed on the brink of tears. But the devotees and Prabhupada could not help from laughing. In Prabhupada's presence, it seemed very jovial. Uddhava came into the room and announced, "We have some prasad for you, Swamiji. Would you like to take now?" "What?" asked Prabhupada. "A little rice?" The devotees began to laugh, thinking of the elaborate feast they had prepared for Prabhupada. Prabhupada had one more thing to show them in his bag. It was a coconut grater commonly used in Bengali households. Prabhupada gave it to Jamuna, who began to grate a coconut while the devotees watched. Surrounded by his devotees, Prabhupada then went to the kitchen and prepared coconut laddus made from white coconut pulp, butter, sugar, black pepper, cardamom, and camphor flavor. He then rolled them into balls, ate one himself, and distributed a few. So there's another amazing thing. Prabhupada has been on the aircraft flying from India to San Francisco and pulls out a coconut grater, promptly goes into the kitchen, makes coconut laddus. Now the devotees didn't know how to make it. He's making them, right? And then rolls them into balls. He eats one himself, and then he distributes them. So maybe we can ask our cooks to consider this. White coconut pulp, got it? Butter, sugar, black pepper, less black pepper, cardamom, more cardamom, and camphor flavor. It's got to be just right. Camphor's too much. It's horrible. Roll them into balls. So maybe we can pray that maybe something like that manifests. Prabhupada returned to his room where he sat down and was silent. Sensing that he should be left alone, the devotees excused them. Everyone was satisfied. Prabhupada was back. Now this is another amazing exchange. One of Prabhupada's disciples, Jivananda. So listen to this exchange. Jivananda speaking. After everyone left, I stayed behind to talk to him. And seeing me just kind of sitting there, he put me to work and made me clean up his room. I began to pick up the paper and stuff and throw them away in the boxes. So afterwards, Prabhupada said, "So, do you have some question?" So what do you think? And I said, "Yes, Swamiji, I'd like to get married. I would like to get married to Hasarani." Prabhupada said, "Oh, who are you?" I said, "I am Jivananda." Prabhupada said, "Have you been initiated?" Prabhupada said, Jivananda said, "Yes." He said, "By me?" And I said, "Yes." He said, "That's very nice. What do you do?" I said, "Well, I was in Santa Fe, and I used to milk the cows." Prabhupada said, "That's very nice." We talked some more, and then I said, "Swamiji, can I get married then?" Prabhupada said, "I'll think about it. You ask me again later." So this is, who Prabhupada is dealing with. He's dealing with people who, when you ask, Prabhupada asks, do you have a question? Instead of asking about, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's pastimes, the intricacies of, Lord Krishna's pastimes. So, philosophical question or understanding, the modes of material nature. Instead he gets asked, can I get married? Can I get married? That's like the misuse of an opportunity to ask a good question. So many other things one could have asked instead of that. So this indicates, the types of persons that Prabhupada is dealing with. He's so kind. He's dealing with people who are really not very advanced. He's dealing with people who end up in the ice cream shop, the donut shop, who haven't shaved their heads, who still have moustaches, beards, who are not getting up for Mangalarti. Mangalarti was only introduced later, 1969. They're not even chanting 16 rounds. They're not even too sure about the principles. They don't even know really what are the principles. So Prabhupada is dealing with these types of people. Although Prabhupada himself is Uttama Bhagavat, and on a very high level, he's coming right down to this lower level where he's sort of associating with hippie type people. Basically it's hippies. San Francisco, 1967, it's hippies. And he's tuning into that type of mentality and trying to bring them higher. Another interview from a devotee called Chidananda. That evening I went to his room to see him. I felt he might be lonely. I went into his room to try to keep him company. But as soon as I got there, he started talking about Krishna. There were some Brijbasi posters of Krishna on the wall, and he would point to them and explain to them, saying, "Here is Krishna, and Arjuna on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. He talked, and I didn't have a chance to say anything, but he just talked about the poster on the wall. I got the feeling we had known each other for some time. He was certainly magnanimous and cordial. As he sat there and talked about Krishna, I felt that he was an old friend of mine. I felt that if he was an old friend, then maybe I would know this to be a fact someday. But my attention span was not very long, and I really didn't know very much about the life of Krishna. So I left after a short period of time. So Prabhupada in the early days was different. I spoke to one devotee, her name was Narayani Dasi, a disciple of Srila Prabhupada. She's sort of traveling all over the world now and preaching a lot. She lives in Vrindavan. She's been in India for 28 years. Very senior lady disciple of Prabhupada. So she went over all of Prabhupada's early tapes, 1966, 1967, because she was composing a course on Bhagavad Gita. She's actually working with the VIHE on teaching the Bhagavatam now. And she told me, she was teaching in Ukraine, that in the early days, Prabhupada talking in 1966, 1967, he spoke in a very intimate way. We will read that one disciple of Srila Prabhupada, one young girl, Prabhupada turned around and said, "One day Krishna will kiss you." So you can see, saying one day Krishna will kiss you, giving the ladies cotton saris, it's a sort of like a different type of Srila Prabhupada we're reading about. So, yes, to a 16-year-old girl, he said, "Krishna may kiss you." And she blushed, and everyone laughed. So, it's very nice to read about this. Exchanges with Srila Prabhupada makes it much more personal. Srila Goswami has stated, Guru Padashraya, first step, 64 items of surrender. First one is Guru Padashraya. Tasmat Guru Padashraya, which means accept the shelter of Guru. Second, Dikshadi, Sikshadi, Sikshanam. Diksha, Sikshadi, Sikshanam. Accept initiation. Number 2 is you accept Diksha. Number 3, you accept instruction. Then number 4, Guru Vishvambara Seva, that you serve Guru with affection and love. Vishvambara, Vishvambena means affection, intimacy, not external intimacy, but real intimacy. So with Prabhupada's dealings like this is very conducive, very anarchal. Anarchal means favorable. It's very favorable. Draws out this type of intimacy. Where there's these types of intimate exchanges, where Prabhupada is talking in a personal way, addressing the disciples by their own name. He knows their names. Joking. Parihasya. Parihasya means joking. So this brings out this type of intimacy, which is actually very favorable for the exchange of devotion. We're preparing ourselves to exchange the intimate relationship with Krishna. It's not like Krishna is some reverential figure that is so great, and we are so fallen and insignificant that we can't even go into the presence of Krishna. But in Vrindavan there is great intimacy between the Lord and his devotees. So one can prepare oneself for this by learning how to exchange intimacies with the Lord's representatives, which means the spiritual master, if one is fortunate enough. So in those days the devotees were very fortunate, they were blessed. This is a very special lila of Prabhupada in these early days, so they're very, very fortunate. So at least we can read about it and appreciate their good fortune. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Any question?
At what point did the devotees get permission to start calling him Prabhupada?
Prabhupada was in Boston in 1968. And one of the devotees asked, about calling Prabhupada something other than Swamiji. Up to then they were calling him Swamiji. So there's two references. There's one reference in this book and there's one reference in Prabhupada Leela. They come out slightly different. And Prabhupada asked, the devotees asked, can we call you something, other than Swamiji? So Prabhupada agreed. He said the Guru, the Acharya, is referred to as Acharya Dev, Vishnupad, Acharya Pad, or Prabhupada. And Prabhupada agreed to being called Prabhupada. So then right after that, there was some confusion amongst the devotees because they were used to calling Prabhupada Swamiji. So on a morning walk, one of the devotees asked,